Hey, this is Roaming Millennial. Welcome back to my channel. You're watching the Weekly Rundown. This is going to be a new weekly segment where every Thursday I address some of the week's top news stories. And of course, the issue we're going to start with today, what I think is on most people's minds right now, is Syria.
As I'm sure everyone is aware of by now, last week there was a chemical attack in Syria that killed at least 70 civilians. In response to this, alleging that Assad was responsible for the attack, President Trump ordered an airstrike on one of the regime's air bases. The Syrian government was warned of the airstrike ahead of time and given a chance to evacuate, but even so, 6 people were killed in the bombings.
Now, since this all happened last week, I've been getting a lot of you guys asking me what my opinions on this are, whether I approve of the strike or not. Long story short, I am 100% opposed to what President Trump did, and here's why. First off, in my opinion at this point, I don't think we can be certain that the Assad regime was even responsible for the chemical attack. American intelligence has asserted that the Syrian army had planes in the area the morning of the attack. But think about this, only 63 hours passed between the attack in Syria and President Trump's airstrike. That's 2.5 days. Is that really enough time for the intelligence community to conduct an investigation, make sure all of their information is accurate, then brief the administration about everything they know, then have President Trump and his advisors take the time to fully weigh the pros and cons of
all available plans of action? I'm thinking no. Plus, even if US intelligence did take more time to review everything before pinning the blame on Assad, could we even trust them in the first place? I mean, based on how upset Russia is right now, it seems like they were pretty wrong about their allegations that tried to paint Trump as a Russian puppet. Additionally, does anyone else remember their false claims that Saddam Hussein was in possession of WMDs? Because Iraq remembers, or at least the Iraqis that are still left remember. Also, it's important to note that the Syrian government
flat out denies that they were responsible for the attack. Now, I'm not under the delusion that Bashar al-Assad is too much of a humanitarian to ever use chemical weapons against his people, but let's look at this objectively. Right now, his regime has all but won the civil war that started in Syria 6 years ago. Plus, up until now, you had the Trump administration saying that they had no plans or ambitions to remove Assad from power. So a week ago, if you're Bashar al-Assad, I'm guessing that your attitude is pretty much that things are coming up Millhouse. Cue the chemical attack.
Look, like I said, I don't think Assad is some saint that's above killing his own people. That's exactly what's been happening for the past 6 years. But my question is, why would he conduct this chemical attack now? His victory is all but assured. If he was in possession of these weapons, why would he not have used them earlier in the war when the outcome was less clear? Additionally, if he really did want to target this area, which is questionable in and of itself, why would he not have used regular bombs or even sent in infantry? Was he really stupid enough to choose one of the only methods of attack that would have broken international law and all but guaranteed intervention? The whole scenario just doesn't make any sense to me. The UN is planning on conducting its own investigation into the incident, and I hope that it brings us more answers. And finally, even if the Assad regime was responsible, as someone who is against military intervention unless it relates directly to self-defense, I still question why this airstrike was necessary. This attack was not against the US or any of its allies. The threat to the West in that area comes from ISIS, which the Assad regime is fighting. And I'm sorry, but I'm just not one of those people that believes the United States should inject itself into every local conflict and police the entire world. But moving along, now that the airstrike is done and over with, the question we should be asking ourselves is, what happens next? Will this airstrike be followed by additional military action, and will this descend into all-out war? An Iraq Part 2, if you will.
Or Part 3, technically. Well, it's hard to say. Immediately after the attack, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson seemed to suggest that further military intervention was possible, alluding to regime change by saying Assad's role in the future is uncertain clearly, and with the acts that he has taken, it will seem that there would be no role for him to govern the Syrian people.
And 3 days later, Nikki Haley, the US ambassador to the United Nations, seemed to echo Tillerson's sentiments, saying that regime change was indeed on the menu for the Trump administration. But here's where things get confusing, because of course they do. The same day that Haley gave her statement, Tillerson had an interview with George Stephanopoulos. In it,
he seemed to backtrack on his own earlier statements, saying that aside from the airstrike, which was meant to represent a one-off message to the Syrian government, there would be, quote, no change to our military posture. And 2 days later, President Trump himself echoed this idea, saying we are not going into Syria. Honestly, it seems like the Trump administration is all over the place right now and unsure themselves of what is going to happen in the future. So I guess only time will tell if there's going to be any escalation and further
US involvement in the Syrian conflict. But I've got to say, as someone who has up until now been overall pretty supportive of Trump, if he does bring the US into the war in Syria, he will be going directly against one of his campaign promises. And the next thing I'd like to talk about is a story that has been blowing up all over the Twitter sphere, the hashtag #SaveDinaAli. On Tuesday, a video was posted online by this woman, Dina Ali, saying that she was a Saudi seeking asylum in Australia. In the video, she explains that she was stopped in the Philippines on her way to Australia by Filipino authorities at the request of the Saudi embassy. She explained that if she were to be handed over to Saudi officials and returned to Saudi Arabia, her family would kill her. And as a result of this serious situation, people on Twitter started using the hashtag #SaveDinaAli in order to garner support for her. Now, since the story originally broke, there have been first-hand accounts that surfaced, not only corroborating what Dina said in her video, but also reporting that she had in fact been returned to Saudi Arabia. And I know random eyewitnesses aren't the most reliable sources, but yesterday her deportation from the Philippines was confirmed by Amnesty International, which I think is a pretty reliable source. As far as I can tell, there have been no further updates to Dina's whereabouts or her condition. But frankly, if everything about the story that's been reported turns out to actually be true, then I personally am not too optimistic about her current
state. Saudi Arabia is one of the biggest human rights violators on the entire planet. Just the fact that this woman was traveling alone without a male guardian would be enough to get her in trouble. Yes, because it is illegal for Saudi women to travel without a male guardian regardless of their age. And I don't mean to minimize the fact that what has happened is awful and that I am concerned for the well-being of this woman, but sadly this is pretty par for the course in Saudi Arabia. At the very least, I hope this serves as a learning experience for people about what kind of horrors and tragedies take place in that country. And it's not really even a question of women's rights issues in Saudi Arabia, because nobody has any real rights in Saudi Arabia. Try being gay, try being a religious dissident. To this day, Saudi Arabia still executes witches, i.e. innocent people, because witches are not a thing. And speaking of human rights, if I can bring things back to the Syria story for just 1 second. To everyone who's arguing that military intervention was necessary because the chemical attack represented a human rights violation, don't you think it's interesting that a totalitarian theocratic monarchy can violate the human rights of its citizens every single day, kill countless numbers of its citizens for trumped-up charges, subject people to cruel and unusual punishment, and the international community does nothing? But all of a sudden 70 people die in Syria, and it mandates
a military attack. I think it's safe to say that the United States has not and will not commit its military to purely humanitarian causes. So we have to wonder, what was the real motivation? Because it definitely wasn't dying kids on TV. That's it for this installment of the Weekly Rundown. Thank you so much for watching, and a big thank you to my patrons who support this channel and make these videos possible. If you like this, please subscribe to see more. I post new videos every Monday and Thursday. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!